January 8, 1941. London, England. The air in Bletchley Park is thick with tension. The quiet hum of machines, a constant backdrop to the mental strain that weighs on everyone in the cryptography department. Inside a dimly lit room, Joan Clark, a young woman with sharp eyes and an unwavering focus, stares at the tangle of letters and numbers flickering across her workstation. She is barely 19, one of the few women among the army of mathematicians, linguists, and cryptanalysts who are desperately trying to decode the elusive ENIGMA machine. What began as a challenge has now become a battle for survival. Yet one mistake, one missing letter, could unravel everything. Joan's pulse quickens, her thoughts becoming a blur. If she can't make this work, the consequences will be disastrous. Her eyes flick over the cryptic sequences, the complex string of letters that have confounded some of the brightest minds in Britain. This machine, ENIGMA, was developed by the Germans to keep their military communications secure. The German command believed it to be unbreakable. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Joan and her colleagues fail, entire fleets of soldiers and sailors may fall into the jaws of Nazi forces. Joan had always known that the work she was doing was monumental, but in this moment, it feels overwhelming. The weight of human lives presses down on her, and she finds herself wrestling not only with the cryptic code, but with the mounting fear that a single mistake could change everything. The room, once filled with the sounds of hurried typing, has now grown eerily quiet. Everyone around Joan is absorbed in their own work, but the atmosphere is thick with anxiety. Joan presses her hands together, trying to steady herself. Her mind races back to the first time she was called into this secret world of codes and ciphers. A brilliant mathematician from Cambridge, Joan's path had been clear: a future in academia, a quiet life full of numbers and equations. But when the war began, everything shifted. She was recruited to join the British government code and cipher school, a place where women like her were still rare, despite the obvious intellectual strength they brought to the table. Joan had always been confident in her ability to solve problems, to crack difficult codes, but nothing could have prepared her for the pressure of working at Bletchley Park, the epicenter of Britain's top-secret efforts to decipher the German military's communications. She had made progress, had uncovered patterns that no one else had seen before. But ENIGMA, like a living beast, refused to be tamed. Joan had spent weeks studying its intricacies, trying to figure out its secrets. Some days it felt as though the machine was mocking her. The constant need to adapt, to stay ahead of an enemy that was relentlessly evolving its code, was exhausting. Yet, despite all the strain, Joan remained focused. The puzzle consumed her, and there was no room for distraction. But now, in this quiet room filled with machines and paper, the true enormity of what they were facing starts to sink in. It's not just the cryptography itself that's so challenging, it's the stakes. It's the lives of thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen, each relying on Joan and her colleagues to crack the code and turn the tide of the war. Every day that passes without a breakthrough means more deaths, more ships lost, more innocent people caught in the crossfire. Joan thinks about the sailors who are out there right now, somewhere in the Mediterranean or the North Sea, unaware that their fate may have already been sealed by the German ENIGMA transmissions they can't possibly know about. Joan's hand hovers over the machine's keyboard, fingers poised over the keys. She can almost hear the ticking of the clock in the room, as if time itself is urging her to move faster. She knows she's close. She can feel it in her bones. There's something, some hidden pattern, that she just needs to find. The smallest change could unlock everything. Her heart races, a bead of sweat forming at her brow. She types furiously, running through the possibilities in her mind. The hours drag on as she traces the sequence, analyzing each potential shift. But then, there it is, a missed letter. One tiny discrepancy that, if overlooked, could cascade into disaster. A single moment of human error, a lapse in concentration, and the key to ENIGMA slips from her grasp. Joan stares at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. The mistake feels massive, almost too much to bear. She thinks back to the lessons she'd learned when she first arrived at Bletchley Park. The importance of precision, of never allowing emotion to cloud one's judgment. She'd been warned of the stakes from the very beginning, told that lives depended on their success. But this was different. This wasn't just a theoretical mistake. It was something tangible. It was real. The thought that her oversight might cost the lives of thousands gnaws at her. She closes her eyes for a moment, pushing the fear away. Joan knows the world doesn't have a luxury of time. She can't afford to be paralyzed by guilt or doubt. She's seen the evidence of what happens when they get it wrong. They've all heard the stories, the ships that went down, the bombers that never made it home. Joan shakes her head, forcing herself to focus. She won't be the one who lets this slip. Not now. Not after everything they've done. Yet, even as she steels herself, the enormity of what's at stake hangs over her. The more she works, the more the realization dawns on her. The German Enigma machine is just a symbol of something much larger. It represents the fight of the entire war, the struggle between two forces, one fueled by knowledge, the other by ignorance. The paradox is clear. Joan and her colleagues, people like her, are the ones who hold the power to tip the scales, yet they are hidden in plain sight, anonymous in their efforts. They are the unseen architects of victory, the ones who hold the truth but remain behind locked doors, their work never truly acknowledged by the world. And then, in a moment of clarity, Joan understands something crucial. This isn't just about breaking a code. It's about breaking the cycle of history. It's about showing the world that intelligence, human intelligence, working under pressure, has the power to change the course of events. Yet, even as the pieces begin to fall into place, she can't shake the feeling that this fight is not just against the enemy in front of them, but also against time, against bureaucracy, and perhaps against herself. Joan takes a deep breath and pushes on. She types in the correction, rechecks her work, and prays that this small adjustment will hold the key to unlocking the larger puzzle. But even as she works, a question lingers in the back of her mind. Will this be enough? Will they ever truly know the cost of their silence, of their hidden role in the war? Or will they be forgotten, just as so many others have been, lost to the pages of history, victims of their own brilliance? The clock ticks on, and the answer remains just out of reach. March 12, 1942. Bletchley Park, England. The sprawling estate of Bletchley Park, once a peaceful country house, has become the nerve center of Britain's cryptographic efforts in the war. Here, within its high brick walls, Joan Clark works tirelessly, her mind constantly racing through encrypted sequences and patterns that no one else can decipher. Her face, pale from sleepless nights and the relentless grind of breaking codes, betrays none of the internal turmoil she feels. Her breakthrough with Enigma has earned her the respect of her colleagues. Yet as the tide of war shifts, she begins to sense a deeper, more pressing weight, one she cannot escape. The problem is this. Joan is part of a covert operation that, for all its ingenuity and brilliance, is still only part of a larger machine. Her work, though world-changing, remains largely unseen by those it was meant to protect. The full extent of her achievements will never be publicly acknowledged, and worse yet, her success might be the cause of untold suffering for those she hopes to save. Joan's sense of accomplishment is tempered by the quiet dread that, in trying to outwit a machine designed by the enemy, she may have overlooked one critical detail, a detail that may cost thousands of lives. As the war intensifies and the human toll becomes ever clearer, Joan finds herself at a crossroads. Can she continue to support this cryptographic war effort knowing the cost of a single mistake? In the darkness of Bletchley Park's code-breaking room, Joan's thoughts flicker back to the last few weeks. The Mediterranean campaign has become a graveyard for so many, and the Italian Navy's movements have been calculated using the very codes she and her colleagues are working to crack. As the war rages, ships, planes, and lives are being lost at sea, while Joan, a key figure in Britain's cryptographic efforts, faces her own moral dilemma. Each time she uncovers a new pattern, the victories feel hollow. Her hands, once steady and certain, tremble with the weight of responsibility. Joan is not alone in this silent war. There are others, too, working alongside her in the hidden rooms of Bletchley. Men like Alan Turing, whose brilliance has become synonymous with the effort to defeat ENIGMA, and a team of mathematicians and linguists who all share the same burden of secrecy. Yet Joan's role is often one of quiet support, her contributions buried beneath the noise of the more famous figures around her. This is the paradox that haunts her. She is indispensable to the success of this mission, yet, in the public eye, she is a shadow. The world does not know the truth of what is happening behind these walls, and even if it did, the full measure of her work would remain lost to time. In a rare moment of reflection, Joan considers the irony of her position. She is breaking codes that will change the course of the war, codes that are saving lives, but those very lives will never know her name. For all her intellectual prowess, the emotional cost of this secrecy is becoming overwhelming. She has spent years training for this role, her mind honed like a finely tuned instrument. But what good is it if no one can hear the music she plays? As victories accumulate in secret, Joan finds herself questioning the very nature of success. What does it mean to win if no one ever knows it was you who made it possible? There's a knock at the door, pulling her from her thoughts. A colleague enters, offering a brief update on the state of affairs at sea. Another convoy has gone down, another group of soldiers lost. Joan's heart sinks as she listens, knowing that some of those deaths were preventable, that if she and her team had been able to break the code sooner, perhaps the outcome could have been different. But the paradox remains. Even as Joan's efforts help guide military strategy, the scope of her impact is invisible to those who need it most. The enemy doesn't know her name, and her own side is barely aware of her contribution. She is a ghost in this war, a piece of machinery that makes the engine run smoothly, but is ultimately forgotten. As Joan turns back to her desk, the weight of these thoughts threatens to break her resolve. What is it all for? In the moments of quiet, when the noise of the war fades, she feels as though she is losing herself in the very thing she is trying to protect. This war, this hidden battle of wits, is devouring her sense of self. Yet she knows she cannot stop. There is no turning back now. The tides of war are in motion, and her work, however unseen, is part of that motion. Joan takes a deep breath, refocusing on the puzzle before her. She has no other choice but to continue. But as she delves back into her work, something shifts. She realizes that, despite all her fears and doubts, she is no longer just playing a game of logic. This is no longer just about breaking codes. This is about preserving something far more fragile than a cipher or a sequence of numbers. This is about humanity itself. The people she is fighting to save, the soldiers on the front lines whose fates are dictated by the information she uncovers. Joan's mind, still sharp and analytical, begins to see the truth more clearly. The mistakes of the past must be confronted. This war is not just fought with intelligence, but with empathy. It is about understanding the consequences of every action, no matter how small. It is about facing the paradox that, in order to save lives, some must be sacrificed. As Joan reflects on this, she feels a surge of clarity. She cannot undo the past. She cannot change the course of events that have already unfolded. But she can ensure that the future is different. She can continue to work, continue to uncover the patterns, continue to break the codes. Her name may never be in the headlines, but her work is no less crucial. She will press on, even as the cost weighs heavily on her shoulders. And in that decision, Joan Clark finds something more than just purpose. She finds resolve. July 15th, 1943. Rome, Italy. The Mediterranean is a vast, unforgiving expanse, and today it will become the final resting place for over 2,000 Italian sailors. The battle is over, but the human cost of this victory is only beginning to be understood. Joan Clark, thousands of miles away, has no idea that her mistake, the simple misplacement of a letter in the ENIGMA code, has triggered this tragedy. The failure to decrypt a crucial message in time has led to the loss of lives, a mistake made not by any one individual, but by the system that relies on its workers to be flawless. Joan's heart aches as the reports of the naval disaster filter through to Bletchley Park. She has known that such a day would come, but the reality of it feels far heavier than she had anticipated. In the quiet of her office, Joan cannot shake the image of the sailors, their lives ending in a fiery inferno, a direct result of the very puzzle she has been trying to solve. She closes her eyes, wishing she could go back, change the calculations, make the right choice, but she knows that is impossible. The war continues, and the cryptographers must continue their work, no matter the emotional toll it takes. But for Joan, there is no true victory in this. She feels as though her contribution, her triumph over Enigma, is a hollow one that has cost more than it has saved. The paradox remains. The work they do is saving lives, but at what cost? The question lingers in the air, heavy and unspoken. What does it mean to win when the price is so steep? As Joan watches the war unfold, she realizes that some victories, though necessary, may never truly be worth the cost of the lives lost along the way. Yet, even as she grapples with this truth, she knows that her role in this hidden world, this unseen war of codes, is more crucial than ever. And so, Joan Clark presses on, haunted by the lives she cannot save, but determined to continue the fight. July 15th, 1943. Rome, Italy. The sea churns with an eerie calmness as the Italian fleet sails into the Mediterranean, unaware that they are walking into a deadly trap. On the surface, it is a routine naval maneuver, a routine wartime engagement. But below, hidden in the shadows of military intelligence, a different kind of battle is being waged, a battle of numbers, of codes, of human error. Joan Clark, far away in Bletchley Park, is working tirelessly as usual, her mind focused on the seemingly infinite task of decrypting the German ENIGMA machine. Little does she know that a small mistake, a missing letter, has sealed the fate of 2,303 Italian sailors who will never return home. The tragedy is unfolding, its ripples extending far beyond the realm of mathematics and espionage. Yet to Joan, it is just another incomprehensible consequence of the war she is trying to win. The cryptographic efforts that Joan is part of seem so abstract in comparison to the human lives that are at risk. Every day, new messages come in, new pieces of the puzzle that could save thousands or condemn them to death. And yet, despite their best efforts, the complexities of war, its unforgiving nature, continue to remind them that even the most brilliant minds cannot control every aspect of its chaotic reach. Joan had known, even before coming to Bletchley, that her work would be important. But the reality of the weight she carries with each letter decoded, each message cracked, is something no one could have prepared her for. There is a coldness to it, the knowledge that a failure to act quickly or an overlooked detail could determine the fate of men she will never meet, who will never know her name. It is this deep-seated contradiction that gnaws at Joan. She is part of a team that is unraveling one of the most complex encryption systems ever devised, yet no one will ever fully understand the scope of her efforts. The broader world remains ignorant, unable to grasp how much of the war is being won not on the battlefield, but in the quiet rooms of Bletchley Park. And this tragedy, this loss of life, serves as a grim reminder of the personal cost of these victories. The sailors who are lost in the Mediterranean, their ships torn apart by bombs and torpedoes, will never know that their deaths were tied to one letter, the letter Joan had missed.